Between 1540 and 1560, Saint Teresa of Ávila walked through a silence that frightened her soul, a season where prayer felt empty. God seemed distant, and every spiritual effort collapsed inward, leaving her wondering whether the divine presence had quietly withdrawn forever. She later confessed that during these years, devotion became mechanical. Confessions felt hollow, and the interior warmth she once knew vanished, producing shame and confusion as she continued outward religious duties while fearing that her heart no longer truly believed. This prolonged dryness did not resemble doubt alone. It was a grinding absence, a spiritual desert where Saint Teresa questioned herself relentlessly, comparing her inner barrenness to others' fervor, and quietly suspecting that God might be displeased with her hidden weaknesses. In her own handwriting, preserved in the book of her life, she admits fearing hypocrisy, believing she prayed only with her lips, not her soul, trapped between public reputation and private emptiness. Unsure whether perseverance itself had become a subtle form of self-deception. For nearly 2 decades, Saint Teresa remained outwardly faithful, attending Mass, obeying convent discipline, and guiding others, while inwardly enduring a cold distance she could neither explain nor escape, a contradiction that slowly taught her compassion for unseen spiritual suffering. Importantly, this was not a collapse of belief, but a testing of endurance, where faith survived without emotional reward, forcing Saint Teresa to walk by obedience alone, trusting that love could exist even when consolation, clarity, and spiritual sweetness completely disappeared. She would later describe this season as humiliating and purifying, stripping her of spiritual pride, breaking reliance on feelings, and teaching her that genuine prayer is sometimes nothing more than remaining present, wounded yet willing, before a God who seems silent. From 1540 onward, her writings reveal a woman torn between despair and duty, learning slowly that holiness is not proven by constant fervor, but by fidelity, when the heart feels abandoned, confused, and painfully aware of its own limitations before God. This hidden struggle challenges modern assumptions about sanctity, reminding believers that even great saints may endure long seasons without comfort, miracles, or emotional reassurance, yet continue forward, sustained only by disciplined trust and the quiet refusal to abandon prayer entirely. As we enter her story, we are invited not into triumph, but into patience, where Saint Teresa of Avila's silent endurance becomes a mirror for our own dry seasons, whispering that perseverance itself can be an unseen miracle slowly forming within. During the long years between 1540 and 1560, Saint Teresa of Ávila continued her monastic life outwardly unchanged, yet inwardly burdened, serving within the Carmelite convent while carrying a hidden sorrow that few around her ever truly perceived. At this time, 16th century Spain valued visible devotion, discipline, and obedience, leaving little room to speak openly about interior dryness, causing Saint Teresa to suffer in silence, fearing misunderstanding, judgment, or accusations of spiritual failure within the church structure. Despite her interior struggle, church authorities never condemned her during these years, recognizing her obedience and humility, even as Saint Teresa herself doubted her spiritual condition, interpreting God's silence as possible correction rather than abandonment or punishment. In the book of her life, she describes prayer becoming exhausting, not consoling, where effort replaced sweetness and endurance replaced joy, marking a decisive shift from emotional devotion toward a mature faith grounded in surrender rather than spiritual sensation. Saint Teresa's illness during these years further complicated her interior state, as physical pain blurred spiritual clarity, reinforcing her belief that holiness was proven not through strength or ecstasy, but through patient faithfulness amid weakness and misunderstanding. Crucially, She did not abandon the church or personal prayer, but remained within sacramental life, even when prayer felt empty, modeling a theology of perseverance that later guided countless believers facing similar seasons of interior darkness. Her spiritual directors encouraged moderation rather than dramatic change, teaching Saint Teresa that dryness was not evidence of divine rejection, but often a refining process permitted by God to deepen humility and reliance on grace alone. These decades forged her theological realism, shaping a saint who would later speak honestly about suffering, distraction, and doubt, offering believers not idealized holiness, but a credible path grounded in truth, patience, and mercy. When grace finally returned with intensity after 1560, Saint Teresa recognized that her long interior winter had prepared her soul, teaching her that God often works deepest not through consolation, but through sustained fidelity in apparent absence. Thus, her years of dryness were not a detour, but a foundation, shaping the reformer, mystic, and teacher she became, ensuring that Saint Teresa of Ávila spoke not from theory, but from lived endurance tested by time and silence. When Saint Teresa of Ávila finally emerged from her long interior drought, she understood something few believers grasp. God had never left, but had been teaching her to love without reward, to trust without feeling, and to remain faithful without emotional confirmation. Her testimony comforts those who fear they have failed spiritually, reminding them that dryness is not disqualification, but often preparation, where God deepens the soul quietly, reshaping desire, humility, and patience beyond what visible devotion can accomplish. Saint Teresa teaches that prayer is not proven by sweetness, tears, or visions, but by return, again and again, to God's presence, even when nothing is felt, nothing is understood, and perseverance feels heavier than hope itself. For believers enduring similar seasons today, her life whispers reassurance. God may seem absent, but silence is not rejection, and delay is not denial, as divine work often unfolds most powerfully beneath the surface of suffering faith. Saint Teresa of Avila's 20-year endurance reframes holiness, revealing that saints are not those who always feel God, but those who refuse to leave Him, even when prayer becomes dry, heavy, and stripped of all emotional comfort. Her journey invites us to examine our own faith honestly, asking whether we seek God for consolation alone, or whether we are willing to remain when He offers only silence, waiting patiently for meaning to emerge in time. In her later years, Saint Teresa spoke with gentleness toward the weary, because she remembered the weight of dryness, transforming her suffering into compassion, and her silence into guidance for souls walking unseen interior battles. This story assures us that God's deepest work may unfold slowly, invisibly, across years, shaping saints not through constant joy, but through steady fidelity when faith survives without emotional light or immediate understanding. If you are walking through a dry season now, Saint Teresa's life gently reminds you that perseverance itself can be prayer. Endurance itself can be worship, and remaining faithful may already be a hidden miracle. If this story touched your heart, write Amen in the comments, not as habit, but as a quiet act of trust, joining Saint Teresa of Ávila in believing that God is closest when He seems most silent.